Okay, I wanted to make this video to talk about um, lag in SCUM. So, if someone complains that SCUM is laggy, that maybe they're experiencing rubber banding, desync issues, delays in moving items in your inventory, then this is a multi-layered statement. One layer is you're talking about a snapshot in time. What you're probably saying is that SCUM is laggy now in this particular time because I know that at least playing on the surface of the world in SCUM that there have been times, in fact most of the time that I've played SCUM, that it hasn't been laggy at all. So so we um, now we can ask, are you doing something differently? What are you doing differently? Like there are some things that you can do in SCUM that will be laggier than not. Um, but let's let's assume that what you're doing isn't the cause of your experience. So the first question is it your hardware? Is your system optimized for gaming? SCUM needs to be on an SSD, solid state drive. We've known this for years. If you have it installed on a hard drive, have you defragged the hard drive since the last update? Do have you ever defragged your hard drive? I know people that have been gaming on PCs for years and they've never defragged their hard drives. If you've been working with PCs since before Y2K, then you probably know about defragging your hard drive. You might even know about setting up a contiguous page file or swap file, but in today's versions of Windows, they say you don't have to do that anymore. Um, right now, one of the big issues that is supposed to be causing people's systems to get bogged down is Windows Update Delivery Optimization, which is basically Microsoft using your PC to serve out update files to strangers on the internet. So you should probably disable that. Um, it if you're on a slower connection, it'll take longer to download Windows updates, but if you're multiplayer gaming, you're probably on a pretty good internet connection, so it shouldn't be much of an issue. Um, have you uninstalled any bloatware on your system? Have you eliminated any unnecessary background processes on your system? Okay, so let's assume it's not your hardware, and it's not the hardware um, in your internet connection that is going to the internet service provider. Like, it's not your network card, it's not your cabling if you're using cabling, it's not your router, it's not your modem for your broadband modem. It's not your connection to the internet at your home. You've eliminated all of those things as possible sources of the problem. So then we can ask, is it your internet connection to the server? How is your internet connection to anywhere? Have you investigated that? Have you done any internet stability tests to the physical location of the SCUM server you're connecting to? So, a tool that I used recently because I was experiencing some serious rubber banding and desync and lag that I've never experienced before playing SCUM, or at least in a very long time, is a website called Packet Stats. So I'm going to show you this now. So I'm connecting from the southeast United States, but the SCUM server that I'm connecting to is in London, UK. So I set that to London, UK. Um, let's see. It's got little flags here. I'm not sure what the flags are for. I think that's just showing how many destinations they have for each of those flags, maybe. Anyway, so down here, farther down, I don't know why they place it so far down. Click on Enable Alerts. So we're going to assume that anything above 250 milliseconds is a problem. Now, lately, with the weather being what it's been in the United States, um, because I've eliminated those other factors, I think the weather is behind a lot of this instability lately. Um, the really bad weather we've been having in America, at least with the cold and snow and ice, it's causing issues in physical locations in the internet, and that's causing cascading problems in other parts of the internet. The first time I ever experienced anything like this was around, I think it was 1996, when I think it was President Clinton gave an address. It might have been the State of the Union address and he live streamed it. Well, that just ground the whole internet, at least in America. Um, it just degraded the whole internet experience in America. So that, I was trying to go to websites that had nothing to do with the State of the Union address, but we saw how a sudden demand in one part of the internet could create problems in other parts of the internet. So, and it doesn't happen often because the internet is very flexible now, and there just aren't many events that could cause such a thing. Release of the Epstein files might cause it. Release of interviews with Epstein might cause it. Um, these are possibilities. Um, so, but I think lately it's been the weather. So anyway, let's run this test and we can see what my connection to London looks like. So it takes about 20 seconds to establish the baseline. But even during that, if there's a problem, you'll hear the ping alerts go off because for anything above 250 milliseconds. So right now it says my connection is great, but as soon as we get, see how it dropped a little bit there with that small ping spike, and that was only a maximum of 142 milliseconds. That's not much. I mean, that's probably playable, but I've seen ping spikes up to 3,000 when it was really bad recently. So we're going to look at this for a couple of minutes, and right now it's 3:47 Eastern time in the U.S., so there's probably not much load on the internet. But you add 5 hours to London, and this is the beginning of the probably or in the middle of the rush hour in London. So business is kicking off there, but still 144 ping is not bad to London. No, that was higher. That was 149, but that's still not that bad. So here's 347. Here's 348. So that's been 1 minute between those two marks, and we haven't seen any issues like I've been seeing recently. I was seeing like a ping spike every 10 seconds to 1 minute. There's 2 minutes since I really started counting. I'll look at it for one more minute. See, the connection now is so good that it's reduced the scale so that you can see more detail. If there's a ping spike, you'll see the fluctuations down here on the bottom and then a massive bar going up towards the top. So there's 350. There was a ping of 157, but that's still not in our alerts. Excuse me, I would say 157 to London is not that bad. And the little odometer here, or tachometer, I guess, seems to agree. So there's 350. And so we're coming up to 351. Yeah, so I mean, I'm not seeing anything, guys. The connection, at least at this time in the morning in America to London, is looking really good now. So we can rule that out. So let's see. So you can check to see what your ping time to the server is. You could just ask for the IP address and check. So then the question, if you've ruled out these other things, then the question is it the server? So we can ask some questions about that. How many concurrent players are on the server, and in what parts of the world are those players found? So the guys at G Portal have said that if the server is serving out to people on one side of the world, say America in our case, and then serving out to another part of the world like Southeast Asia, then that's going to increase the chances of desync. Um, this is in the case of our server. This is something that we just accept because we have people playing on the server from both ends of the world, and we value them, and we don't want to deprive them of access to the server. So that's just something we have to live with. How often does your server restart? So I used to play on a PvE server that would have 40 concurrent players on it, and it even had Discord bots that would run little sweepstakes and stuff, and I mean it added features to the game that weren't in the game. And anyway, the first 2 hours on that server would be, pretty playable. But then in the third hour, it would get so laggy and desyncy that it started to become unplayable. But they would set their server to restart every 3 hours. But again, that was a server that had 40 players on it with a Discord bot. Ours, we have like maybe 6 players max usually concurrently. So that shouldn't be that much of a demand, but it might be what we're allowing on our server that could be causing some problems. So, but we'll get into that. So the question is, the next question is it the version of the game? And there's pretty much one gauge of that. If there isn't a general outcry by players that the latest update has created lag, rubber banding, and desync issues, then the game version is not the likely culprit. If there is visible outrage in the community caused by an update, then there isn't much your server admin can do about that. You would be advised to contact GamePires, but if the community is already in an uproar, then GamePires has already heard about the matter. So you might just be filling their inbox and preventing them from getting the fix done, But really, if you're not getting satisfaction from the game and it's due to an update to the game, GamePires is the people to talk to, not your server admin. Your server admin can look at all the rest of this to see if it is something that he can do something about. Obviously, some of these factors are something you'll have to look into because I don't live in your house, for example. Um, Next question. What are you doing in the game? Now, if you're flying, you might get frame rate hitches as squares of the terrain load in, especially at heights. This has been a known issue, and they've said that they've addressed it in a patch, and I think it did get better, but I don't think it's perfect. I'd say it's about 80% good. And the remaining 20% could be enough to make the experience unpleasant for you. But again, that's something that gamepires would have to address. However, I have personally observed while in drone mode, and I think I've also seen it happen when people have been flying in the air, namely Dr. Just and Madam Hour, while recording episodes, that if you fly close to a base that has lots of hoarding going on in it, that it can turn the game into a slideshow. We're talking about 2 FPS with very low geometry detail, very low textures, and the terrain looks like a tiled floor. So that leads us to the question, what can you do to reduce the load on the server? Practice minimalism to some degree. Don't hoard needlessly. If you have 20 RPKs when you will never use them or never share them during this wipe, you are imposing unnecessary load on the server. And you are degrading the experience for other users. Now, I'm not going to tell you how to play the game because personally I like the game to be more flexible for players than the developers at Gamepires do. But I should inform you as server admin on what you can do to keep the game experience good for everyone. So one thing you can do is to sell some of those unnecessary items to the traders or to other players. You can share them directly with other players or indirectly by leaving them in unlocked chests or vehicles wherever you please, so that players who are getting a start can find those resources and make use of them themselves. And then that spreads, like if you think of items in the game as poop, that spreads the poop over a wider area so that you don't have a mountain of poop in your living room. You can craft items out of the various pieces in order to reduce the overall number of items in your inventory. If there's an item that requires 11 different pieces, like 11 inventory squares in order to make it, then go ahead, craft that item. That item might take up 4 inventory squares, but now you've freed up 7 inventory squares. You know? You don't need like 6 wardrobes of metal scrap. This should be common sense, but now you know if you didn't before. You can expose all these items to the elements. Of course, this is the nuclear option, but you can just take them somewhere and dump them somewhere out of a chest or vehicle, because if you leave them in a chest or vehicle, they're going to be semi-permanent in the world, and you can dump them, expose them to the elements outside your base territory. Again, that's a nuclear option. That's just pure waste. I mean, why would you do that? You're basically urinating away your time and effort. So that's why I say instead, sell the items, share them with others, craft items out of the various pieces. Another thing you can do, don't build more than you have to. An excessive number of building elements, even an excessive number of bases. You know, in this case, on this server, you're allowed to put down more than one flag. That also imposes a load on the server. There's reasons there are default limits to the number of elements that players can use in their base building, but being that there are that this is not a high population server in our case, I prefer to allow players some flexibility to bring their creative visions to reality uh, within the world, you know. Um, so, some things that I can do to reduce the load on the server is that I can reduce the number of allowed base elements. Now, if I turn down the number of base elements allowed, I do not know what will happen to your base um, if you're over the new limit. Let me see if Google AI can answer that question. What will happen to a player's base if the maximum number of base elements is reduced on the server and their base is over the limit? Google might know the answer. While the maximum number of base elements, construction parts is reduced on a server basis that exceed the new limit, generally enter a grandfathered or restricted state. While existing over-limit bases are not typically deleted immediately, they cannot be expanded further until the total part count is brought below the new limit. Here's what generally happens to a player's base when it is over the new limit. It becomes read-only or uneditable. The base becomes locked. You'll be unable to add new additional building parts to the base. You're prevented from repairing, in some cases like SCUM, if a base... Oh yeah, oh damn it, I should have specified in SCUM. If a SCUM server reduces the maximum number of base element structures, exceeding the new limit will not be immediately deleted but will begin to decay, preventing repairs until the total element count falls below the allowed threshold. Affected structures will slowly break down without maintenance. Key consequences of exceeding base limits: decay mechanism. Excess base elements will start to decay and you will be unable to repair them. Preventative measure. Players must remove or demolish enough parts to get under the new limit to halt the decay and resume maintenance. Gameplay impact. This forces especially large clans to maintain smaller, more efficient bases or invest in special high maintenance or fee-based mechanisms if implemented to keep extra structures. Dropship encounter. If the server has enabled the dropship base encounter, which we haven't, a raid mechanic, and the base is over the limit, it could trigger this, leading to structural damage. Limit system. The base element limit applies to modular building components and varies based on squad size. Essentially, the system forces compliance by making over-limit structures unsustainable to maintain over time. So there's our answer. Another thing that I can do is I can remove the ability for a squad to place multiple flags so that you can't have multiple bases. I don't really want to do that. I can set the loot multipliers lower. Of course, that'll make the game harder, and it'll make it harder to get some of the higher tier items, like you know, uh, the guy that I'm playing with. He just found a AWM sniper rifle, and like I think we've probably I think he's probably been in the game um, about 30 game days already. Um, so yeah, it can be hard to find some of those higher tier items, especially when the loot multiplier is set lower. Um, it can reduce the number of characters. In other words, NPCs of all kinds, whether it's puppets, animals, mechs, armed NPCs. It can reduce the number of characters in the game. Um, our character count is not set high. It's like 100 or maybe 120. I'd have to look at it. Um, yeah, so that's probably not the source of any lag or desync. Um, I could reduce the number of vehicles found in the world. Of course, then that makes it harder to find those particular vehicles that I've reduced the count on. And I'm not sure if, for example, all of the Leicas have been found, and maybe there's a base that's hoarding them. Then if I reduce the number of vehicles, I don't know if that will cause some of the vehicles to despawn. That vehicles that are in your possession. Let me see. What will happen to a player's vehicles if the maximum number of vehicles is reduced on the server and their vehicle count is over the limit in SCUM. In SCUM, if a server's maximum vehicle limit is reduced below the current number of player-owned vehicles, the excess vehicles generally do not immediately vanish upon restart. However, they become vulnerable as the server-wide vehicle cap prevents new natural spawns, and vehicles in excess of the limit often become subject to decay or disappearance, especially if they are not locked or parked within a claimed, active, and functioning flag area. Key details regarding vehicle limits in SCUM. Vehicles over the limit may disappear, particularly after server restarts or if they're left outside. Locking, ensuring vehicles are locked and within a base flag area may prevent them from being deleted in some configurations. Purchasing limits. If a player has too many vehicles, they may be unable to buy new ones from traders. Types vehicles that are not, for example, bicycles or boats, are usually subject to the strictest vehicle limits. It is highly recommended for players to sell, store, or in some cases park in secure locations any vehicles immediately after a server-side reduction to avoid losing them. So, I mean, it looks like it's kind of fuzzy whether players might lose the vehicles if the number is reduced. So anyway, I don't know if I missed anything in this, but try to do some of these things. I would be interested in hearing what your packet stats results are. Given what I'm experiencing this morning, I kind of doubt that, um, at least at 4 a.m. Eastern time in the U.S., that you would be having any connection problems to London. So I'm going to stop this video here. This is some food for thought. And, working together, we could try to make the experience better for all of us. Um, just please, investigate some of the factors at your end. And I'll submit a support ticket to G Portal and see what they have to say.